Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, hopefully not good night. Uh, I would hate to think that I put you to sleep with this presentation, but welcome to Everything You've Ever Learned at a Security Conference, where I will go over all of the themes, trends, and things that have been observed at a number of security conferences over the years, some better than others, some worse than others, some more vendor focused, etc. This is basically the breakdown of the agenda. I will give a quick bio about myself, talk about a couple of anecdotes. If you're not really sure what an anecdote is, it's kind of like the homily at church, if you're familiar with that. And if not, then Google that word and work your way backwards. I will talk about all of the bad news. I will cover some of the fake news. I will talk about some of the good news. And I will talk about some of the things that can be done about it, including your security program, your cloud and third party risks, and also because it's 2025, I will talk about artificial intelligence as well. Quick biography about myself. So, again, my name is Joe Proy IV. I have a master's degree in IT from Carnegie Mellon University, as well as a whole host of certifications, 20 plus years in IT, 12 plus in information security and cybersecurity, and for most people, they think that I put all of these letters after my name as some kind of a badge of honor. Actually, it's the complete opposite. So, of course, they're on my resume to make people understand sort of that I'm coming in the door with some experience, hopefully to get me in front of recruiters and hiring managers. However, when I put them in front of my signature on my email or my LinkedIn profile, it's actually the opposite. So, I do it because I want people to have high expectations of the things that I say, the artifacts that I deliver, any of my output in my work, etc. I prefer the bar to be high because my own expectations for myself are high, and so it's a little bit of the opposite of what most people have. And now you know. Finally, a note on PowerPoint. So for those who know me, they know there's a really good reason why my PowerPoint skills aren't great. And for those who don't know me and who maybe even only see this for the first time, you now know that my PowerPoint skills aren't very special, and you will see that throughout the course of this presentation. You know it, I know it, and we all know it, so there's no need to dwell on it. Um, but again, I use my PowerPoint very minimally. I basically use it as an outline to keep my presentation on the rails and make sure that everything stays sort of on course and keep the presentation flowing and provide some top level bullet points, but that's about it. There's no need for me to type out paragraphs in my PowerPoints and read them to you. I'm pretty sure that you're capable of reading on yourself. Couple of anecdotes. First one, back in 2017 or 2018, there was a major data breach at Equifax, due primarily to poor patch management and then a lot of other things that then happened after the fact. So, one of the interesting things about that, however, is that when that happened, I started to see a lot of commercials for LifeLock. And I mentioned to somebody that that seems suspicious. Not necessarily in that maybe LifeLock was just looking to capitalize on the market conditions. However, what I was told then is that LifeLock actually outsources its identity protection services to none other than Equifax. So, what that means is that when people were signing up for LifeLock to protect themselves against the Equifax breach, Equifax was actually making part of that money. And so technically, they profited off of doing the wrong thing. Now, I haven't verified this, I will admit that. But as I did some research, I was not able to confirm it as false either. Like I said, I don't necessarily fault LifeLock in particular, but I do think that Equifax making any profit off of their gross negligence in not applying a vendor patch that had been available for over 6 months, and then their executives essentially selling off all of their company stock before they told anybody, is completely unacceptable. Anecdote number two. Zero is not no vulnerabilities. So, I apologize for the double negative, but what happened here is there was a situation where there were containers being deployed to an environment, and then there were standard workstations, traditional workstations, actually servers in that environment. The vulnerabilities on the servers were being reported appropriately. The vulnerabilities in the containers were being reported as zero. Why were they being reported as zero? Because the vulnerability management software, or the scanning tool, had a module that was necessary to scan containers that needed to be installed, and it wasn't installed yet. But if you were only looking at the dashboard, you would not know that because the only thing that they had was that there were zero vulnerabilities in any of the containers, which would be really impressive if it was true. The people looking at the dashboard, which were project leadership, senior leadership, executive leadership, management, etc., would have no way to know this. And so it was a very dishonest way of reporting Not the first or last time I've seen it, but definitely the most egregious. SIM card security verification fail. A major cell phone provider requires you for a renewal of your electronic SIM card. So for a lot of modern mobile phones, you don't need the physical SIM card anymore. You just have an electronic one that's on the device. If you need to renew that for some reason, primarily because your phone will not activate, which means you have no cell service, what they require you to do is to get a text message to that phone in order to verify that you are the one that made the request, even if you're logged into the account. The problem with this, as somebody might already realize, is that you have no phone service, so you cannot get the text, and so what was designed to be a very good security tool is actually so secure that not even the person who is intended to be able to use the functionality can use it. So it's not very helpful. It's also poorly tested and poorly evaluated because that would have been something that could have been confirmed with one basic test, in that you would not have access to the phone, it would not be activated, which means you can't get text messages, and therefore there is no way to get the text message. Trust us, we're from the cloud. When somebody from the cloud, any cloud service provider, I don't care how major it is, tells you that you can treat their cloud as though it is a part of your network and that you don't need to have firewall rules between your network and their cloud providing environment, that you don't need to have any sort of management whatsoever, segmentation, or any division basically through VLANs or anything, I would be very concerned about everything else that that person says. Well, the fact is that that is something that some major people in the sales department and even in the technology department of cloud service providers will tell you. I am here to tell you that one of the things that you should do is never that. So, when you have a cloud environment and you use especially infrastructure as a service to augment your data center and augment your servers and your workloads and all of these things in the cloud, you should not and absolutely better not have an open connection between that cloud center and your local network. It should be treated as any other segment of your network. It should be blocked off. It should have zero trust. It should have microsegmentation. It should have a tiered architecture. It should have all of the things that an internal data center should have. Where are my keys? I lost my code. Oh, oh, oh. Just so that none of you have that stuck in your head from Lady Gaga. This was a situation where there was some vulnerabilities identified in a particular piece of software. And when the question came up as to why they were so old and currently unpatched, the answer was, we don't know where the source code is. So, in that case, obviously, the application can't be patched. How long ago did you lose the source code? Well, it was transitioned to a new team about 10 years ago, and they didn't have it then. Which means that an application went unpatched for over 10 years and couldn't be patched because the source code had been lost and nobody had bothered to do anything about it. I don't want to get into all of the things that could happen with this. It could probably be a presentation in and of itself, but I think that most people can probably see that this is a bad situation. And finally, I wanted to talk about one AI case. So Moffat versus Air Canada was a situation where somebody was interacting with Air Canada's AI agent on their website. It was essentially the short version of the story. They wanted a refund for bereavement. They had to go to a funeral and therefore could not make the travel. The AI agent promised them a full refund and provided a link to their bereavement policy. The bereavement policy link that they had provided was one that actually stated that you cannot get a refund under these conditions. However, because the AI agent promised them the refund, the company was forced to honor it by a court up in Canada. The reason that this is important is that even though Air Canada tried to argue that AI is not a person and shouldn't have been trusted, that the customer should have in fact gone and clicked on the link and looked at it themselves, the court ruled no. If the AI agent promises you something, it's basically as if a customer service person promises you something and you are therefore bound to it. This could be very significant if something such as a free year of financial services was promised. And now all of a sudden, you as a financial institution are on the hook for a year of free services to a customer if your AI client or your AI agent or your AI chatbot goes off the rails. We will get further into that later on with the AI section, but it's something worth considering as many organizations delve into the AI space. The bad news, pretty obvious. So, this is the one and only time I will ever use a picture in my presentation. I realize it is very immature and I'm not sorry. So, the fact is, when you go to a security conference, what do you learn? everything is terrible. Everything is bad. Why? Because there are people that want to sell you solutions or sell you products or services that they offer. This is something that is fine. However, what's important about it is that there are very nuanced things when it comes to this. When everything is bad, yes, there is gloom and doom. Meteors are going to hit the Earth. We're all going to get wiped out. The sun is going to explode, and therefore, even moving our data centers to Mars isn't going to save us. We should just panic. Gloom and doom, right? Well, yes and no. So, one of the things that we need to do is identify all of the risks that we can identify, understand the risk and threat landscape and the vulnerability landscape, understand the likelihood and impact of all of those risks, and understand whether or not there's something we need to worry about. There are certain things that we very much need to be concerned about, and there are other things we don't. Again, if we are finding a tool to fix a problem, that is great. If we are finding a problem to justify a tool, that is not so great. And listening to some of the things that I will cover on the next slide that some of the vendors will provide to you at these conferences will help to, I think, make this a little bit more clear. So I will stop showing you that picture now, and we'll get into some of the fake news. So, our product can fix everything. This is something I have heard time and time again. I have sat there and listened to presenters talk about how great their product is, how excited they are to show it to you, how innovative and wonderful it is. Okay, maybe that's true. However, it is also the case that there is no such thing as a silver bullet. You cannot buy a set it and forget it tool. You cannot buy a tool that does not require configuration, maintenance, understanding, knowledge, etc. And there is no product that can fix everything because everything can't be fixed. The fact is, you can never get to zero. You will always have vulnerabilities, you will always have risks, you will always have things that need to be addressed, no matter what you do. Because the fact is, the adversaries don't have to play by the rules. Basically, the comparison that I like to use is think about it like you're in a boxing match. Before the referee even rings the bell, your opponent kicks you between the legs. And then you look at the referee for them to do something, and instead of doing anything, they ring the bell. At that point, your opponent can do anything that they want. They can punch, kick, elbow, knee, all of these things. They can bring weapons to the ring and hit you with a chair in the head. The only thing that you are allowed to do is attempt to block. You cannot counterpunch. You cannot do anything else outside of trying to block their punches. You may be able to survive for a while, but sooner or later they're going to get there. That's what we call an advanced persistent threat. Somebody who genuinely wants to get into your organization, who has the time, money, and resources to do it, especially when we talk about things like nation state actors and all of that, is probably eventually going to get in. The only thing that you can do is make it as difficult as possible, and when they get in, make it as easy to detect them as possible that you will find them as soon as you can, and that the damage will be minimized before you can kick them out. This is critical because there are many places that will promise you full visibility or full identification, full detection, etc. They'll talk about machine learning and all of the new things that their tool can do. The fact is, no tool can do everything, and you should be looking for the tool that best suits your needs, including your organization, your budget, etc. And then you should be following with that. No need to worry about your data in the cloud. Why would you worry about your data in the cloud? It's protected by people who know what they're doing. These are large cloud service providers. Surely they have good protection on your data, right? Wrong. The fact is that no matter which cloud you use, whether it is a infrastructure, platform, or software as a service, one of the things that is always going to be a customer responsibility is the data. It doesn't matter what they tell you, it doesn't matter what they promise you. If you look at the shared responsibility model for Amazon, for Microsoft, for Google Cloud providers, I'm sorry, Google Cloud Platform, all of it, data is going to be on the customer side. Don't let them promise you that it's not. And certainly, if they do, make sure it's in writing in very strict terms. But the fact is, you should always be worried about your data, just as if it was in your own data centers, you would be worried about it, including things like backup, including things like categorization, protection, all of these things. Your organization is special. This one is interesting to me because so many times I have had salespeople come into an organization and say, yeah, your organization's really unique, and yet our product can just somehow fix all of your problems. Now, here's my question for that. Is it really plausible to think that somebody created a product specifically for your organization, and now all of a sudden, when you guys call to get your demonstration of your product, that person has to go into all of the engineers who have developed this thing and say, "Great news, fellas! You remember that one very special client that this product was created for? They finally called. It's all been worth it. We've been waiting and waiting. all of these other people that have contacted us that we knew it wouldn't solve for, the really special organization in the room finally came here. No, that's not how it works. They design it to fit as many organizations as are possible, and yours is no different. You may have a special sector and you may have special data and all of these things, but you are not so unique that there is a product out there that is going to help you in your organization and not other people's. Industry experience. This is something that you see a lot in job postings on different websites, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Indeed, whatever it might be. The fact is, when it comes to industry experience in technology and security, it really doesn't matter. You don't necessarily need to understand the principles of accounting to be in the financial sector of technology, just like you don't need to be a healthcare expert to be in the technology sector or technology organization within the healthcare sector. It is good to know these things for sure. And especially if you are somebody who sits between the business and technology, you should absolutely know. However, you should not be an expert in these fields. There are other people who are paid other money to do those things. Technology stacks don't change. You might have a Windows shop, you might have a Linux shop, you might have certain web servers that you use, certain databases that you use, Oracle versus Microsoft SQL Server, etc. But the fact is, all of the principles of a good security program, the tenets that make it that, so least privileged access, segregation of duties, good logging and monitoring, these things don't change. The type of data that you are protecting, so maybe PHI for healthcare versus financial transaction data for banking might change, sure. But how you protect it and the important things that you need to focus on do not. And finally, TikTok. I don't really know that I need to say anything about TikTok, but I will say this. If you are getting information that you don't know from TikTok, you should probably stop. You should not get your technology and security information from TikTok. What type of people should not be getting technology and security information from TikTok? The people that need technology and security information from TikTok. Those of us that are in the space can go and watch a TikTok video and maybe know that it's true or not true. However, if you don't know, just because the person sounds like they know what they're talking about doesn't mean they know what they're talking about. It's no different than the rest of the internet. Just because it's out there doesn't mean it's true. Now, I will caveat this with one thing. If you are getting your legal advice from TikTok or how you should interact with the police, please don't stop. It's not good for my sleeping habits. However, it gives me something to do on my phone when I can watch people get arrested who are talking about things that they clearly saw on TikTok or social media, and the videos are hilarious, and it gives me a reason to have a smartphone and a Wi Fi internet connection. So thank you for that. Please continue. There is good news, and I don't want to necessarily destroy everybody's hopes. So what can we do about it? Now, first thing that we can do about it, and the thing that we should do, and the reason that most of you might be watching this right now, utilize the right people to make the informed decisions and ask the right questions. So, when you are working as a consultant, when you are trying to work as a risk professional within your organization, whatever it might be, people who are making decisions, people who control the purse strings, people who control the budget, people who control the strategy, make sure that they understand what the decisions are. If you're asking them to accept a risk, make sure they understand the ramifications of not accepting the risk. If you are asking them to give you money for a new program or a new product or a new project, give them the information that helps them to decide why this is generally beneficial to the organization. Define a security guard program based on the chosen direction. So, one of the things that's important is this. Your security program should be based on something. Maybe it's on NIST, maybe it's on ISO 27001, maybe it is on some other framework. There are plenty of them out there, of course. No need to reinvent the wheel. The one thing that you want to make sure that you're doing, though, is that you are always focusing on that goal. You are doing maturity assessments based on that goal. You are doing all of your decision making based on that goal. And even if you have to pivot and change the way that you get there, you should always have the end result in mind. So basically, think about it this way. Let's say it's a GPS. If you MapQuest directions, those directions are static. If you get to a point and there is a road closed for construction, which, if you live in the Pittsburgh area and it's summertime, there is. So, if I have a GPS, I can have it reroute me. It's still going to get me where I'm trying to go, but it can change the way that I get there. This is important because I need to be able to get where I'm going, and I need to understand that as the threat landscape changes, as the risk landscape changes, and as time passes and new technologies come about, and my competitors are doing different things, and there are new threats on the internet, etc., I need to be agile enough to adjust to them without losing track of what it is that I was trying to do in the first place. Be honest. So earlier I mentioned that zero vulnerabilities is not equal to no vulnerabilities. Report the truth. Do not try and change the numbers to make things look good. Do not try and change the colors to make things look good. Dashboarding and tables and all of that stuff can be really great, and they can be really terrible because I have seen so many of them manipulated so that the picture and the story that people are trying to tell is the one that it tells as opposed to the truth. The fact is, it is much more important to be honest about things and to solve them rather than to not be honest about them and hope that nobody finds out. Sooner or later, somebody's going to find out, and maybe you won't be there at that time because it's years down the road, but you should want to do the right thing. Have integrity. Trust but verify. This goes into everything. If you are a second line person at a bank, if you are a risk professional, a consultant that is looking into something, or if you are a doing an assessment and due diligence on your third parties. Believe what they tell you, but make them prove it. Have them show you independent attestations, have them show you a SOC 2 certification, an ISO 27001 certification, something that can prove to them, not just in their own words, that they are in fact doing what they say that they're doing. This is critical. Communicate why you made a particular decision. Everything that you do should have a why factor to it, whether it is a statement in your policies, a control to support those statements, or the reason that you decided to accept or not accept a risk. Understanding why these things are in place is going to go a long way in helping people to understand what they need to do and in getting people to do it. If you are explaining to people why they should have a strong password, for example, it's more likely that they will understand that. Otherwise, it's going to be viewed as overhead. They're not going to want to do it. They're not going to want to sit there and type out a 16-character password every day. They're going to write it down. They're going to put it on a post-it note on their keyboard. They're going to have it stuck to their monitor, whatever it might be, because it's an inconvenience to them. However, with security awareness, I always tell them that the benefits of that training are that you can actually use those concepts outside of your work. It's not something you can do with your anti-money laundering training. It's not something you can do with most other trainings, actually. But with the security awareness training, knowing things like how to detect a phishing email or how to enable multi-factor authentication or something like that can benefit people outside of the workplace. And if they know that, they can do these things, they will adopt these practices, and when they come back to work, it will be second nature and you won't have to force it on them. Knowing your audience. So, who am I talking to? Am I talking to executive leadership that needs a high level summary but important information? Or am I talking to the frontline management who needs to know all the details? Tailoring your presentation or your paper or your artifact of any kind to your audience is critical. They need to have the right level of data presented in the right format and get to the point. Make sure that they know exactly what they're understanding and what they're supposed to see, and make sure they do it. Working toward the same goal. I already kind of touched on this one before. This is going back to what I said before. We should all be on the same page and all working towards the same thing. We have different teams, we have different organizations that are going to be working towards that goal from different points of view and perspectives. That doesn't mean we aren't working towards the same goal. We should all be focused on the same thing, all be looking at the same end result. Finally, we should be able to get to that result and objectively say to each other that we all believe we achieved what we set out to do. Know when it's okay to say no, but remember to add a but. So, what I don't like to do, and what so many people do seem to like to do, especially throughout technology, unfortunately, is when you go to them for something, they say, that's not my team. Okay, I did not ask you to tell me that it wasn't your team. I asked you for a favor or a question. And what I need you to then do is tell me who it is. So, or if I'm asking you that I need to do something, let's say I need local admin rights on my computer. This is a pretty dangerous thing. But obviously, the answer should be no to that. But here is a solution that will get you to achieve what you need to do. Maybe we have a tool set up that will allow you to establish a connection to your database. Maybe we have a sandbox set up that will allow you to install the add-ons that you need for your development environment. Whatever it might be, always say no if it's necessary. I shouldn't say always say no. You should say no when it's necessary. But you should always add the but afterwards and either direct them to the solution or the person who can help them so that you're not the dead end, you're not the obstacle that is in the way of them doing their work. You are simply making sure that a risk-minded approach is in place at the organization. So, let's talk a little bit about the security program. I mentioned before some good tenets of a security program. Governance documents, they are the roadmap. They should be everything that somebody needs to know about what your security program is. What framework is it based on? What legal and regulatory requirements is it based on? What contractual requirements is it based on? Also, what exactly are they supposed to do? Your acceptable use policy, for example, I should be able to read that and understand the things that I am allowed to do. If it's not in there, it should be implied that I am not allowed to do it. It shouldn't necessarily be an explicit list of things I'm not allowed to do, because then I can make the argument that if it's not on that list, I'm allowed to do it, or at least I thought I was, and it really makes it difficult to enforce. Identity and access management. This is a matter of making sure that somebody only has what they absolutely need to do their job at the level they need it. If somebody only needs read-only access, give them read-only access. If somebody doesn't need access to social security numbers or client identification numbers, use obfuscation or data masking to prevent them from seeing it. This is something that is often neglected, especially in test environments. I don't know why the test environments are so often blown out of proportion in terms of less security controls, but the same data that's in production. People who are doing testing should still be under the same security requirements as a production environment. Number one, to make sure that the testing is right. But number two, they shouldn't be seeing stuff that they have no need to see, especially the developers and the engineers who are developing the test environment. Data protection. Where is your data? How much is it worth? What is the category that it should be? And it should be protected accordingly. Don't put a $5 lock on a $10,000 piece of data, and vice versa. Don't put a $10,000 lock on a $5 piece of data. This can either be cost prohibitive, it can be a waste of money, or worse, you can be not protecting your most sensitive and critical data to the level that you need to. And then whenever there's a breach, it will cost you a lot from a legal and regulatory perspective, from a potential financial penalties perspective, and certainly from a reputational risk perspective. Um, this is something that is oftentimes not done, especially organizations that have a lot of unstructured data. They don't have it categorized appropriately. And if you don't have it classified as confidential or HCI or PII or any of these other things, or CUI if you are a CMMC customer, um, these are things that can often get overlooked. Change management. So it's important, of course, that the coding be secure for anything that you are developing internally. It is also important that when you are submitting a change request, you are justifying why the change is necessary, what the change is hoping to achieve, how the change will be validated, how the change was already tested and verified to work in lower environments, and who will be validating the change. It, of course, should also be approved by the right people. That is exactly for the reasons here. Eliminate or minimize production data in test environments. Also, limit the impact on production outages. If there is a change that is going to impact production availability and it doesn't get caught in test, do a root cause analysis. Figure out why it didn't get caught. Make sure that mistake is not repeated. Assets, pretty much same as your data. Inventory them, categorize them, and know what kind of data is on them, whether it's in transit, whether it's at rest. Configure them securely. Use a security baseline. Make sure that everything is locked up tight. Make sure that your patches are in order. Make sure that you have good patch management. That goes back to the Equifax thing I mentioned earlier. There are other organizations, of course, that have fallen victim to that. I'm not singling them out. That was just one of the more major ones in recent years. Um, Make sure that you are keeping an eye on your assets. Make sure that the performance is being monitored. Make sure that you have all of the things in place so that you know where your assets are, when they're connected, all of the things that might help to detect anomaly-based behavior, user heuristics, all of the next-gen stuff that goes above and beyond just sort of static signatures and antivirus. Logging and monitoring. I mentioned this before. Dashboards only as good as the underlying data. If you don't have the data to support the dashboards, how can you have a good dashboard? If you don't have a good dashboard to represent the data, it's not going to be meaningful. Similar to how your SIEM kind of aggregates and alerts on your log sources from across the organization, it is important that all of your data be pulled together and I can understand it and I can sort of know what exactly it means. So make sure that your dashboards are honest and that you're not saying there are zero vulnerabilities when in fact there are no vulnerability scanning mechanisms in place yet. Also, make sure that your dashboard is telling the story that you're intending it to tell. So if I want to keep track of how many vulnerabilities I have per asset across the organization, make sure that I'm getting that information and the relevant information not only for the people to know what those vulnerabilities are, but maybe what line of business those assets are associated with and how long they have been out there and how much overdue there is and which ones have a patch available for them and which ones do not and which ones are vendor dependent. All of these things that require some manual work, sure, but they are critical. And when it comes to these things, and especially for your SIEM, make sure that a home alarm is your focus and not a car alarm. So if your SIEM or your dashboards are alerting on everything and constantly throwing up alarm bells and red flags and so forth, people are going to start to tune them out. They're going to get alert fatigue. They're going to make a filter in their inbox that sends them all to a folder, and they're never going to look at them, and you're never going to get a response. You want to make sure that when people see an alert, they know that there is something wrong that they need to address. When you hear a car alarm go off in a parking lot, the only thing you think is, can somebody please shut that car alarm off? I don't know anybody that goes running out thinking that a car is about to be stolen. If you hear a home alarm go off, on the other hand, usually people are going to pay attention to that and think that there's something happening. That's what you should be focused on when it comes to your dashboarding, when it comes to your SIEM, when it comes to all of your logging and monitoring. And finally, people. People are your biggest problem or your biggest solution. It totally depends. Make sure that they are trained, as I mentioned earlier, with the security awareness training. Make sure that knowledge sharing is in place so that there isn't one person who's capable of doing something. And if they're on vacation for a week, it has to wait for a week because if they don't come back, that thing may still need to be done. You should not have a single point of failure or a bottleneck in any of your places. That's where knowledge transfer comes in. There should at least be one backup for everything on your team. If somebody is the primary for provisioning access, there should be somebody who knows how to do it just in case they need to. And more importantly, it should be documented somewhere in a manual or some kind of procedure that would let anybody be able to follow it, even if they understood nothing about it. I know documentation isn't fun. I know we don't like to do it, but in this case, it's really important. Cloud and third party risks. So basically, what I will say about this is make sure that you are assessing that the third party you're going to use, whether it's a cloud service provider or another service provider of any kind, are they doing things as good as you would do them or better? So all of your policies and standards and procedures and controls are in place. Develop your due diligence questionnaire and ask them, are they doing these things? Ask them open-ended questions. What's your patch management policy? What is your policy on new employee training? And do you do background checks? Do you do drug screenings? Do you do credit monitoring or credit checks? Um, Ask them about what their password policies are. Ask them where they have multi-factor authentication enabled and where they don't, and make sure that you are not just allowing them to say yes or no, but requiring some elaboration on your questions so that they have to actually give you information. Now, the caveat to this is that you want to make sure that you're not asking too specific information because they may come back and say, it's confidential, we don't share that. So if you're asking them to give you network diagrams, for example, they may require you to sign an NDA first, or they may just not be willing to provide it. And that's fine, but this is also where things like a SOC 2 can help or an ISO 27001 certification, something that gives me some assurance that I don't just have to take you at your word. And this goes back to trust but verify. I put it here again because it's so important. And I just mentioned why, but that is something that is incredibly. I mentioned earlier about the shared responsibility model. I mentioned it again here specifically because, like I said, data is always on the customer. There are other things that are too, but I cannot possibly emphasize that there is nothing more important than that data piece. If you are focusing on anything when you are outsourcing to the cloud, when you are migrating to the cloud, whatever it might be, make sure that your data is always front and center. Know how important a vendor or supplier is to the business. Is this something that if they would go down tomorrow, you would be dead in the water? Or is this something that's a convenience to have, but you could be without them for a few days? That's important for your business continuity plan. That's important for your disaster recovery plan. That's important for you to understand how often you should be doing your due diligence on this vendor and how important and critical it might be if something happens at that vendor. So, what level of stringency should I be placing on my due diligence assessment to a vendor that is vital to my business and has the most critical of data to the business? Avoid getting locked in and locked out. So if the vendor uses a lot of proprietary platforms and tools and software, and you decide to migrate away from them, are you going to be able to get your data in an open, format that can be read by something other than their proprietary software. Be mindful of that. The other thing is if the vendor goes out of business tomorrow unexpectedly, because nobody plans to do that, hopefully, what's the exit strategy? Are they going to provide your data? Are they going to continue to support the software for a period of time so that you can migrate rather than just coming and saying, hey, by the way, tomorrow is our last day of operations, and then you're out of luck. The contract is everything. There are a lot of times that vendors will promise you the world. They will tell you that they will take care of everything. They will tell you that they will do everything. If it is not memorialized in the contract in explicit writing and signed and agreed to by the vendor, it does not exist. Doesn't matter what their sales team promises you to get to sign the contract, make sure it's in there. I cannot overemphasize this because if it is not, and once that contract is signed, it is too late. One of the other things that I will talk about, and I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but for artificial intelligence, the same thing holds true about the contract. If you do not have something in the contract that says that if you end the relationship, you want all of the data purged and that they have to demonstrate that they were able to do that so that it no longer influences their AI tools and is completely wiped from all of their systems, there is a very real chance that your data will live on in their environment and they will continue to be able to use it and it will continue to add value to their solution. Basically, you're giving away your organization's most valuable asset, which is its data, potentially for free and potentially in perpetuity to all of these external people. Make sure that there is an exit strategy, that if you terminate the relationship, they are going to terminate the data. They're going to wipe it from their systems just as you would normally want them to. And again, if it's not in the contract, it does not exist. It doesn't matter what they promise you in email, it doesn't matter what they promise you on the sales calls. Make sure it is in the contract. Now we will specifically talk about AI. So it is by the people for the people. Well, the people in the United States have an average reading level of fourth grade. When you are speaking to a jury, they tell you to speak to people with an eighth grade education. When you are creating an advertisement, they tell you to create an advertisement for people with a ninth grade education. It's why the commercials on TV hurt my head. That is critical because just because somebody created an AI solution, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is foolproof. In fact, no solution is. Every software that is out there is created by a person. And if you are into video gaming like myself, you know that if you get a video game on release date, almost guaranteed, there is going to be a patch that has to be applied before you can play that game. That means that between the time that they released it to manufacturing and the time it was released, they discovered more problems. You essentially have become their beta tester, you essentially have become their guinea pig, and now that they can fix things later, they simply do. So rather than push out the release date and say we should do things the right way and responsible, they simply release it. And the same thing is true with software applications. We want to be the first to market, we want to be the first out the door. AI is the latest and greatest thing, it's the hot topic. We will get out and then we'll fix it. That is a very dangerous thing when it comes to artificial intelligence. The fact is, it's a data monster. It turns the entire idea of giving an organization the least amount of data possible on its head. Now, we need to give them as much data as they could possibly get so that they can train their engine better and so that it can give us better results. At least that's what they tell us. However, too much data can also be a bad thing because of the hallucinations that I mentioned here and because it can simply misinform you. It can get confused, it can get very strange answers coming back, or it can completely misinterpret the question. If somebody asks, hey, I work at an organization that has employee resource groups and I'd like to get involved, your AI should not respond and give them information about anti racism. While that could be a very sort of benign response, it could also create a very severe situation and potentially result in a lot of additional headaches for human resources that isn't needed. So, three T's for AI: training, transparency, and trustworthiness. So, when we talk about the transparency and trustworthiness with your customers, this is how we used AI to reach a decision, and they need to understand when it was used and how it was used. So, when you're applying for a job nowadays, you see that all the time. Hey, can we use AI to analyze your resume? You can opt out of this, of course, but if you have AI doing an analysis of loan applications, for example, your customer needs to know that AI factored into the decision and how it did. Document how decisions are made. So, for example, when software is documented, we document how the software works and we document the end result. If I put in the same values into a piece of software, it should give me the same result all the time. not with artificial intelligence. Because of AI's nature, it is more focusing on what exactly could it do versus what it is supposed to do. So rather than focusing on how the thing works, I need to basically explain how it got to its answer. So think about it like showing your work in math class when you were in school. I need to make sure that you can see that there was no bias, there was no subjectivity, there was no arbitrary logic that was used. There was a very defined set of logical things that resulted in you getting the response that you got from the AI. And by the way, having people overlook those things is just as critical. So having a human in the loop to assess and make sure that the result of AI is one that somebody of competence would have likely come to as well, that can be critical. No bias is also critical. No bias is something that we see in a lot of the regulations, and I mentioned two of them at the end here in the NIST AI Risk Management Framework as well as the EU AI Act. They are looking for AI that is objective and that is not using any sort of bias or prejudice or anything like that to make its decisions. Train your developers and users. Also, train your developers and users. And did I mention train your developers and users? The other thing that we see a lot of in these regulations, not only the EUAI Act, but also stuff coming out from the New York Department of Financial Services, stuff coming out in California, in Colorado, in Utah, in Singapore, and in a lot of other regulatory circulars and letters and things that are coming out now, is that there is an expectation that people are trained either to develop AI or to use it. So one of the things that NIST did is it released a companion to its secure software development framework that talks about all of the considerations you should make when developing AI tools. The other thing is that there needs to be some sort of a demonstrated sort of tiered training model, if you will, that shows that anyone who is using artificial intelligence or anyone that is creating AI agents within your organization knows what they're doing. And certainly that should always be true. However, it's not as explicitly required in a lot of other tools and technologies as it is with artificial intelligence, perhaps because of the implications, again, of the tool being able to kind of do its own thing and to potentially do something completely different than it was intended to do. So make sure that your people are trained. Finally, any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, criticisms, opinions, agreements, disagreements, thoughts, feelings, anything like that? I am more than happy to talk to you about this, even in a less monotone voice than I perhaps used throughout this presentation. This is something I'm very passionate about. Security is something that I believe very strongly in, so I very much enjoy my job, and I will gladly talk about it. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Like I said, my name is Joe Proy IV. You can find me out there. Um, I don't really use much other in social media, but also feel free to leave comments on this video. More than happy to engage. Also, I am the program director on the board of the Pittsburgh chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance. So if you're interested in joining our chapter, please feel free to look up the Pittsburgh CSA chapter page on LinkedIn. We also have a website. It is pghcsa.org, I believe, or csapgh.org, sorry. And also, it's on our LinkedIn page. Certainly hope to see you at our events. We'll more than happily talk about this stuff with you there too. Also, I will hopefully see you at any of our local conferences that I might attend. And again, we have a very vibrant security network here in the Pittsburgh area. I am very grateful to be a part of it. There's a lot of great people and talent here. I hope everybody found something in this presentation that was helpful. I hope somebody got something out of it. And again, appreciate any comments or concerns, feedback, etc., positive, negative, or indifferent. Thank you.